On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we're going to be talking about a big trade in the conference that definitely does affect the playoff picture. We're going to talk about whether Bill Zito should make a move, and we're going to discuss the upcoming Panthers and NHL Alumni Game here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, February 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and send in your screenshot of that and your 5-star rating to at LO_FLA Panthers on Twitter or Locked On FLA Panthers at gmail.com for your chance to win 2 free tickets to the Florida Panthers versus Tampa Bay Lightning game on February 6th. Winner will be announced via a YouTube short on the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. So, Cats fans, it's been a few days since the Florida Panthers last played a game. Of course, we finished on the pre-All-Star break on a high note, and of course, this is also a time of evaluating teams. Every GM is going through it, and one trade happened, a big one in the Eastern Conference, and Bo Horvat of the Vancouver Canucks, the captain, was traded to the New York Islanders in exchange for Anthony Beauvillier, prize prospect in Atu Ratu, and a 2023 conditional first-round pick. And that's a big trade that shakes up the race in the Eastern Conference, as the Florida Panthers and the New York Islanders are right there trying to get one of the wild card spots. And this will be a great time to bring in my guest on the show, Jacob Winans. It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And Jacob, welcome back to the show. And more importantly, how are you feeling about that trade between the Vancouver Canucks and the New York Islanders that just creates a big shakeup in the East?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Always appreciate it. Yeah, like you said, it's been a few days since the Panthers last played a game. That game against the Bruins was pretty fantastic. I think we all enjoyed that one, and now it's back to reality of the playoff chase. Watching some of these teams kind of jostle for position. So the trade is huge. It's going to impact that wild card race without a doubt. It's going to shake up the entire Eastern Conference. Bo Horvat, if you're not familiar with his game, he plays out in Vancouver, and where they don't get as much media attention here on the East Coast. But he is a very under the radar superstar player, over a point per game, over 30 goals, one of the most consistent goal scorers in the NHL. He's an immediate upgrade to the center unit that the Islanders have. It's really Lou Lamoriello going all in. He's trying to get something out of this core. It's an aging core. It's a group that is getting up there in years. They haven't really won anything. They've gotten far in the playoffs before under Barry Trotz, but they just couldn't get the ultimate goal of winning a Stanley Cup. They think Bo Horvat gives them a chance to do that. He certainly doesn't hurt their chances, and he will definitely make things a little bit more difficult for the Panthers going down the stretch. It is worth noting the Panthers don't play them again this year. The season series with the Islanders is over, if I'm not mistaken. So that is one big benefit. Panthers did win that season series, so they have that tiebreaker should it come to that. But yeah, it's something to watch because Bo Horvat fills a need for them. And, long-term, big picture outlook, I don't know that the Islanders are going to be able to get him re-signed. I really don't see it. It feels like he might just be a rental. And that is a very steep price to pay for a rental. Atu Ratu, a guy who at one point was expected to be the first pick in the draft, fell all the way to the second round. Made his NHL debut and scored a goal against the Panthers this year in his NHL debut. So we're familiar, and I think it's a big trade. It could really shake up the playoff picture for sure.
Yeah, and you also think about the reasons why they made that trade, because what's the biggest issue with the Islanders? It's really secondary scoring outside of Matt Barzal and Anders Lee. I mean, Casey Cizikas has played a little bit of wing and a little bit of center as well. So they don't have too many centers now. You can never have too many centers in the NHL. So, and Jeff Merrick was talking today about how you could have Barzal and Horvat on one line, and then if in case of emergency, you could pull like a McDavid Draisaitl and put them on the same line and have a whole bunch of firepower there. And he has 11 power play goals on the season. Bo Horvat. That's more than that's more than everyone. Like, that's 6 more than the next highest on the Islanders. And the Islanders power play is 31st in the NHL as well. And he wins those key faceoffs that help him keep in the zone instead of wasting 20 plus seconds as well. So I think that's really huge when it comes to the Islanders. You think about how in the summer when the Johnny Gaudreau and Nazem Kadri sweepstakes, people thought that Kadri was literally going to go to the Islanders. And what was the biggest criticism of Lou Lamoriello was going was not making moves in the offseason. Yeah, they re-signed people like Noah Dobson as well as one of them, but also some of the players on that aging core that have regressed as well. I mean, Josh Bailey has regressed as well. JG Pajot might be a candidate to be traded as well. They also lost a few of the pieces as well from their 2 Eastern Conference final runs. Devon Tays got traded to Colorado Avalanche for 2 second-round picks, and then Jordan Eberle is part of the expansion draft too. So it's a whole bunch of the core not performing to what they need to be, and as well as losing some of those pieces too. So I think this is a big shakeup, because it's funny, because last week I was saying that I wasn't scared of the Islanders because of their lack of scoring and Sorokin having to carry them. But man, you get Vezina caliber Sorokin, even though it's Linus Ullmark's to lose, and then that scoring, they're not a Stanley Cup favorite by any stretch of the imagination. But they are. I think they're going to be that team that's going to be there right to the end with the Panthers. When last week we thought that they were just going to fall off.
I agree. I was definitely on that boat, thinking that they were going to fall off. That their secondary scoring wasn't going to be enough to carry them. Like you said, some guys aging and really regressing lately. I didn't think that they had the firepower to keep up. But now with Bo Horvat, it really, really changes the picture. Now this may give some Panther fans PTSD, but Bo Horvat really comes in and brings a John Tavares like presence to their forward lines, and with him and Matthew Barzal, they're too deep at center with first line quality centers. Being able to deploy them on a power play at times, like you said, they've got the goaltending. They've got Sorokin, who's fantastic, one of the best in the league, and they have Semyon Varlamov, who is probably one of the higher end backups in the game, would be starting on a lot of teams. So yeah, just a week ago, I thought maybe they weren't really that big of a threat, but now as we come out of the All-Star break, that's a team that we have to keep an eye on, because they could really catch fire. They've got the firepower now. Bo Horvat fills he fills a lot of them. He helps power play. He helps penalty kill. He wins faceoffs. Secondary scoring, not as much pressure on your bottom 2 lines. And the one thing that we haven't really discussed here is how much he will elevate his line mates, whoever those may be. Matthew Barzal and whoever's on his line, they're going to produce. But when you get to that second line, the production hasn't necessarily been there. Now with Horvat, he's going to produce, but he's also going to help the guys around him to produce. And that's a really big thing to keep an eye on, because that's a team that can definitely contend for a playoff spot now. And the Panthers can't seem to catch a break this year, and now the race is going to get even more difficult. But the goal still remains the same. The Panthers have to take care of their own business, win their own games, and things will work out. And I don't even want to begin to think about what the firestorm coming for the Islanders front office should they not make the playoffs and lose Bo Horvat in free agency. That
Oh,
would be catastrophic. So the Islanders are going all in to try to make the playoffs this year, without a doubt.
hmm yeah. And also one other disappointment that has been on their team has been Kyle Palmieri as well. Has a no trade clause and then 2 years left on his deal. Someone, of course, Lou Lamoriello is very familiar with from his time in New Jersey. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2 and discuss whether this is an alarm to Bill Zito on whether to do something as far as a trade. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about FanDuel Sportsbook. And FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line, point spreads, and who will score a touchdown. FanDuel's sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. Feel free to add what you like about using the FanDuel app. Join FanDuel today at fanduel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's fanduel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Back on this second segment here on this Wednesday, February 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is a Winans Wednesday, so we have Jacob Winans here on the show. And Jacob, with this trade with the Islanders, the fact that here's also the thing. The trade deadline isn't until March 3rd. So 33 days away, just about, at least on the top of my head. This sets the market for the trade deadline. Bo Horvat was the biggest piece. They committed to Andrei Kuzmenko, Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, even though Elias Pettersson's contract is close to expiring, and they still have a decision to make on him. There's rumors about Thatcher Demko not wanting to be there anymore, and he could get quite a return as well. But it's got me thinking about, is Bill Zito in a position that this sets a big alarm for him to make a sort of move, regardless of the lack of cap space for the Panthers?
Yeah, so you have to look at this from two perspectives, and it's going to be the Panthers are in a really challenging place right now because they're not clear sellers, but they're definitely not clear buyers either. They're in a position now where they will very likely have to ride it out until the trade deadline and just see where they end up when the trade deadline approaches. If it looks like they're not going to make the playoff cut, then we transition into seller mode and we see what we can get for some of our expiring deals. You see what you can get for guys who may have term but aren't necessarily a part of the future plans, or who can fetch a really nice return. Someone like Sam Bennett or Sam Reinhart, for example, we've seen their names floated around as potential trade pieces. I don't necessarily want to see that happen. Of course, we all want to be buyers by trade deadline time. You want to be in a playoff position, or at least right in the thick of the race. So when you're looking at this, you have to look at it from two perspectives, and this is what Bill Zito, I'm sure, is doing. You have to think of what the Canucks got as sellers in this case. So when you're building value for the players that you could potentially be trading if you are a seller, the baseline is what the Canucks got for Bo Horvat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're looking at trading Sam Bennett, looking at trading Sam Reinhart, someone of that caliber, they're not going to fetch the return that Bo Horvat got, but you at least know what Bo Horvat got, and you can work down from there. Now, if you're looking to buy, it's a little bit more tricky because I don't think the Panthers they're not going to be hunting for a huge fish. Like Pat Riley likes to say, they're not going for a whale at the trade deadline simply because we don't have the cap space. We don't have the draft capital. We don't have the prospects to make that happen. It's unlikely. I know we all want to hear Jacob Chikrin or one of these other huge names that could completely alter the team. Barring a miracle or the Panthers parting with a very high-end NHL-ready prospect, someone like Anton Lundell or Spencer Knight, you're not bringing back a franchise-type player at the deadline. What's much more likely is the Panthers are going to look to fill some minor holes, depth players, penalty killers. That is something the Panthers are desperately in need of, is more penalty killing, and some depth on defense, because I don't think Mark Stahl's a guy that you can ride all the way to the end of the season and through the playoffs as an everyday player. So the Panthers' needs are not quite what the Islanders' needs were. We're not going to be buying as high as they did, and we simply don't have the resources that they had to go and get a guy like Bo Horvat. We were kind of spoiled last year as the team that went and got the giant fish and Claude Giroux and Ben Sherratt, but this year it's a different story. I don't think there's a ton of pressure on Zito right now to make a move because at the end of the day, we don't know if we're going to be buying or selling, and the Panthers' future looks a lot different than the Islanders' future. The Islanders are in a position where they have to win now or they're heading towards a rebuild. They had pressure to make a move. The Panthers, it's been known that this was going to be a down year. It was going to be a reset year, but the future is very nicely set up for the Panthers to get back to contending, get back to the top of the Eastern Conference, regardless of what moves are made. So you don't want to do anything too drastic and mortgage that.
And Bill Zito's, of course, had the happy trigger, which is not necessarily a bad thing, which what we saw last year. And listen, this is why you have a front office, a whole team around you that if Bill Zito wants to, someone says, hey, maybe this is not the time for this. And who knows what the salary cap is going to look like. I mean, the NFL just released what their salary cap is going to look like, and they got a significant bump. So this gives me a good feeling that the NHL could be heading in that same direction. This, regardless of whether Gary Bettman has played a little gamesmanship with the PA when it comes to that as well. And do you really want to not only Anton Lundell and Spencer Knight, but Maki Samoskevich as well, as far as trying to trade that big piece, and then you just deplete the hell out of your prospect pool too. Let's not forget that. And and you said it best, penalty killers. And also when it comes to Sam Bennett and Sam Reinhart, another team that I've heard of that has possible interest in Sam Bennett is the Minnesota Wild. But what's the one name that has been floating around the Minnesota Wild as far as like a trade rumor? It's been Matt Dumba. And a trade for Matt Dumba and Sam Bennett is going to be downright impossible. Not just like for the cap hits itself for both of them. Matt Dumba's making $6 million, Sam Bennett's making 4.4. Even with retained salaries, that's going to be a hard trade to make. And also, Matt Dumba's been a scratch a lot in the most recent weeks from Minnesota, and his game has regressed. So I don't think a Matt Dumba deal to South Florida is going to be in the works as well for that. So it's just about what kind of it's going to come down to really that last minute, because it's going to be how many points are you going to be out? Is it one? Is it five that you, because I also counted the amount of games that are from now until March 3rd. There's 11 games, which means 19 games left to make something happen. You have a lot to think about when it comes to how you want to approach those last 19 games. And this is where not necessarily jobs are won and lost, but you can make your seat possibly very hot, because I think Bill Zito and Paul Maurice are staying past this year as well.
I agree. I don't. I think you could get into some real trouble if you try to overreact and make a move that a last ditch effort to get into the playoffs in a year where the roster and the salary cap are just not constructed to have a lot of success. I mean, realistically, now we just beat Boston, and we absolutely could hang with them in a series. I don't doubt that
Yes.
at all. But how much are you willing to rip apart the future, or mortgage prospects, or mortgage future salary cap, or give away a player that's part of the core going forward, just to get to the first round and be a huge underdog against the Boston Bruins? I don't know how much you really want to do that. I'm personally much more satisfied with either making a couple of small moves, tweaks to the bottom of the lineup, or just rolling with this roster the rest of the way and seeing where they land. Because this is not the final product of what this Panthers team is going to be. Barkov is locked up long term. Kachuk is locked up long term. We've got Montour, Forsling, Verhaeghe, Duclair all locked up for next year. Sam Reinhart's locked up for next year. Sam Bennett is locked up for next year and beyond. This team is going to come back with reinforcements, and I don't think you need to do anything overreactionary and mess with that at the deadline. I mean, unless we're either in a playoff spot or within a reasonable amount of points, less than 5 points, capable of getting in. I don't. I really think you have to be very careful about what you do here. And thinking about the prospect pool, the Panthers are very limited in their prospect pool. They've given away some high end prospects in trades. NHL ready guys like Owen Tippett have been shipped off. Beyond Samoskevich, you've got Grigory Denisenko, who would probably be an immediate prospect included in any game changing trade. He would definitely be the next guy on the list. You've got Alexei Heponiemi, who's right on the fringe of NHL production, and then you look beyond the AHL roster. You've got guys like Ludwig Janssen, who really put his name on the map. I'd like to hold on to him. I don't want to throw him in a trade just to try to get into the playoffs as a wild card. You got Mike Benning, who's tearing up the college ranks right now. I'd like to hold on to him too. Exactly. Casper Puccio. These are all guys that would very likely be shipped off just to bring in a rental to try to get into the playoffs as the last seed. It's not worth it to me. I want to keep those prospects, develop them, get them into the NHL as Panthers, or include them in a trade down the line when we have a much better shot at contending and winning a Stanley Cup. So that's where I think we are, and I think we need to not compare ourselves to the Islanders as far as the pressure to make a trade, because the Islanders were under much more pressure to make a trade given the age of their core. This is really one of their last shots at doing this with the group they have. The Panthers have the next half decade plus to make a move. So I'm comfortable with writing this out.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the playoff race, Washington did defeat Columbus in overtime by a final score of 4-3. So makes it a little bit difficult for the road, but the Panthers do have a game in hand on Washington after tonight. We're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to be discussing the upcoming Alumni Game, which will be held tomorrow at the Florida Panthers IceDen in Coral Springs. We're going to discuss that next here on the show. But first, we're going to tell you all about Built Bar. And looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try Built Bar. And what makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covering 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come with unbelievably flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com, and now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. Back on this Wednesday, February 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. And it's been awesome, like the pictures that I've been seeing of the Fort Lauderdale beach sweep on Sunday and the City of Sunrise Hockey Festival, which my bags are all packed. I will be heading to South Florida tomorrow morning, and I will be attending the Florida Panthers alumni game versus the NHL alumni, and very excited to see the Panthers alumni coached by Jessica Blaylock of Bally Sports Florida, and the NHL alumni coached by ESPN's Emily Kaplan. And just the rosters, when you think about both of them, I think it's just so cool. I'm not going to read exactly name by name, but I'm looking forward to what I want to ask you first. What are the names that you are looking forward to most from both the Panthers and the NHL alumni for Wednesday night?
Absolutely. So the Panthers alumni is the roster that, of course, stood out to me the most. Looking at that roster, I love Luongo putting on the
Hmm.
pads and playing in net again. It feels like he didn't retire that long ago, and we were just seeing him make spectacular saves at the age of 40 in the NHL. I love seeing Luongo anytime he's around. Um, a few guys, Thomas Fleischman is one that I'm excited to see. Peter Borrell, Keith Yandel dipping his toes into retirement now, finally getting involved in an alumni game. The old man, he's he's done with his NHL career, and now he can play the old timers game. So I'm happy for him with that. The surprise name that was really cool to see was David Booth. That's the one that I was super excited to see. Is David Booth. He's a guy who, when I first started watching the Panthers, when I first moved to South Florida, he was one of my favorite players. The old number 10. Anytime he touched the puck, the whole arena would immediately start the long drawn out Booth chants, and I love that. I was a big fan of David Booth when he was playing with the Nathan Hortons and the Stephen Weisses of the Panthers and the Thomas Vokoons. That was a fun era. Even though they didn't have a ton of success, they were a lot of fun to watch, and David Booth was at the forefront of that. So those are the names on the Panthers roster. On the alumni roster, one name really stood out to me, and it's Patrick Marleau.
Yes,
I thought that
Iron
was a
Man.
really, really cool inclusion. The other Iron Man across from Keith Yandel, I thought Patrick Marleau was a really cool name that's included. I didn't know he would be around South Florida, but that's a pretty cool one. And of course, I have to shout out the coaching matchup here: Kaplan versus Blaylock. That's fantastic, and Jessica Blaylock definitely gets some credit because she's shown some versatility this year. She doing the sideline reporting, the in the studio work. She took over play by play one night when the Valley broadcast went out. Jessica Blaylock was a play by play announcer, and now she's a head coach. So there's nothing Blaylock can't do apparently.
I might be biased, but I guess the only issue is that she's a Gator. But we could forgive her for that. But
Yeah, that's
but
fair.
one of my greatest friends in the media is also a Gator in Aaron Brown, but of the hockey news. But hey, we can forgive both of them. But yeah, I caught the tail end of David Booth's career with the Panthers, but also you mentioned Thomas Fleischman. The very first season that I started following the Panthers, 2012, when they broke that drought of not making the postseason, which is now broken by the Buffalo Sabres. But another one, of course, we hear his voice all the time on the radio broadcast. Bill Lindsay as well. And even though I didn't experience the Brian McCabe, former captain, here, even though he was only here for 3 years, and of course he's still with the organization as well with the
Mhm.
Panthers. Ever since he retired, he was automatically in the organization now with the director of player personnel. Since he retired, there's also a lot of players that have had short-lived times as Panthers as well. But also on the NHL side, on NHL alumni side, here's one thing that I caught was really cool. The NHL alumni side, they might not all of them might have played, not any of them actually have played for the Panthers, but there are some South Florida ties here. Like of course Jeff Chikrin, part of the Bally
Mhm.
Sports team. Uh, Trevor Daley spent 10 years with the Dallas Stars, but he's currently playing in the AHL with the Florida Everblades. Paul Healy, NHL journeyman, but is an assistant coach for the Miami Toros. Another one, Sean Hines. Majority of his time in San Jose, great international career, but he's the head coach of the Florida Alliance 16U team too. Sylvain Lefay, assistant coach for the Florida Panthers. Unfortunately, part of that '96 team that beat the Panthers. Um, you already mentioned Patrick Marleau. Tomo Rutu, former Panthers assistant coach.
Mhm.
So I think it's just really cool what the Florida Panthers did. Oh, another one is Alexei Karofsky. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Longtime Maple Leaf, but he's also part of the South Florida Hockey Academy as an assistant coach for their 18U program. So I think the Panthers deserve so much credit for how they theme this. They really do want to show off this area, and I think this is such a great community based type of game. Of course, it's going on in the Panthers IceDen. Of course, there's so many activities going on the beach side with the festivals, red carpet, you name it, and of course, we've already seen activities happening on the internet as well from the beach sweep and the hockey festival. But it's just all comes back to one thing: our region. And I don't usually look forward to all-star games, but this one's special to me, and I hope and I'm sure it is to you, and I hope for the listener it is a special time for all of you as well.
Definitely. I wish I could go down with you to enjoy the festivities. College is colleging, so I'm not able to leave UCF for the weekend, but definitely something that's well deserved for the South Florida community. The Panthers have really done a great job of growing the game. Some of those guys you listed, I mean, I didn't even know any. I didn't know some of them were even located in Florida, helping to grow the game in the area. Alexei Ponikarovsky, I had no clue that he lives and works in the area, helping to grow the sport. But I do remember the tail end of his career with the Penguins, and longtime Maple Leaf, great player, and yeah, some of these guys that are helping to grow the game. It's pretty special, because when I first started watching the team, that they were giving away tickets with Little Caesars pizzas. That's how I went to my first Panthers game. It was a free ticket that came with a $5 hot and ready pizza. And nobody was going to the games. Nobody had any idea what hockey even really was. And that's when I first started playing hockey as well. No one really knew that hockey was a growing professional sport down here. It's and it has really taken off, especially with the Panthers' recent success and the efforts to grow the game. I love seeing them showcase the area, the beach, the ice den, the arena, the outdoor events, the skills challenge. We've heard there's going to be some surprises, and all the alumni coming together to play. It's awesome. We definitely should not take it for granted. And I hope next time that my one thing for next time we host an all-star game, hopefully within the next 5-10 years we get another one. Please, Jaromir Jagr, be retired by then so you can play in the alumni game. That man is 50 years old, still going, and I wish he was playing in an alumni game, but he's still playing real hockey somehow. That man is a machine. But all these alumni, it's so cool to see it. And that South Florida is able to run on the national scale of this all-star game. It is really cool what they put together.
And it's definitely come a long way. And your story about Little Caesars and going to a game, there's gonna be a time where a generation of hockey fans, of South Florida hockey fans, will not remember Little Caesars pizza being inside of Kmart's as well. There's gonna be a generation soon enough that when you mention that, they're gonna be like, huh? Yep. That's how you know we're getting old, that's for sure. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you so much once again for joining me, as always. For all of you guys as well, I cannot wait to get down there tomorrow. And if you happen to be at the IceDen tomorrow for the Coral Springs Hockey Festival, hit me up. Maybe we can say hello and chat for a little bit right before the alumni game. But Jacob, tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Definitely. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8. Armando, you and all the Panthers fans, listeners, watchers, enjoy All-Star Weekend. It doesn't come around to our backyard all the time. Definitely take in the experience and have some fun. This is
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jacob, and I'll see you next week, my friend.
looking forward to it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time The Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects with Heidi Halakash. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Sports Today. Peter Bukowski gives you a 30-minute or less podcast on the entirety of the sports scene. Listen to Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.